Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast is brought to you by Holland Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston Podcast. I'm joined today by Rebecca Crane. Rebecca is the head coach at Kingston Gymnastics, providing quality, affordable gymnastic classes to girls and boys aged 3 years and above in the Kingston area. What's unique about Rebecca's teaching style is how she places the children at the centre of each session, encouraging them to assist with decision-making whilst safeguarding their safety and welfare. And be sure to listen to the end, where Rebecca shares with us how the values she learnt from her gymnastic coaches, such as tenacity, hard work, and discipline, have held her in good stead throughout her business life. So whether you're interested in knowing more about gymnastics or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Rebecca Crane, to the Inside Kingston podcast. Rebecca, I'm really excited about this conversation because, well, although today I'm about as flexible as an average plank of wood, I can still remember once upon a time really enjoying gymnastic classes. And I think our listeners can learn a lot from your expertise in this area. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay. So, Rebecca, where did you grow up?
So I was actually brought up fairly local to Kingston in the Epsom area. And I live with my family in Epsom and went to school there as well.
Oh, great. Now, the little exposure I've had to gymnastics was through school. And I think that might be the case for a lot of our listeners too. But I'm curious, what got you into gymnastics in the first place?
Yeah, very, very similar. Spent a lot of time probably on the school field doing cartwheels. And was then recommended by a school teacher that I went to a local club to have a trial and just see how I got on, as I think they've probably thought I had some sort of talent there. And then it basically went from there. I sort of really flourished. I was quite late into gymnastics because of that. A lot of sort of the competitive gymnasts that we see come through have really started training from very early ages, sort of 5 or 6 years old, and the competitive cycle starts from 8 at gym. So it's really a young sport. So I was quite late. I don't think I really started training properly till I was about 9. So that's quite late coming in, to be honest, which sounds ridiculous. But then literally got snatched up into a squad very quickly, and the training hours ramped up very quickly and was then quickly put on the competitive cycle ultimately.
Oh, that's awesome. And did you go to university? And if so, what did you study?
Yeah, I went to St Mary's University in Twickenham and I studied physical sport and education. And I'm actually a PE teacher now.
Oh, wow. So those gymnastic classes really set you on the path, really?
Yeah, totally. I think that really ignited my passion for sport in total. I mean, gymnastics has always been the thing that I've always come back to, but I've always had a love for lots and lots of different sports. I'm a keen swimmer and was a good netballer at school as well, and have subsequently gone on and done quite a lot of athletics. So again, gymnastics is such a great platform for all of these things, as it offers such great development of all of the core fundamental movement skills, which we see across so many other sports.
Absolutely. And there's definitely a few threads there that I want to pull with you throughout this conversation, Rebecca. Could you tell us a little bit about when you started coaching and your career journey so far?
Yeah, certainly. So I started coaching as a teen, really, as my gymnastics career started to filter out. I was a very competitive gymnast, reached this sort of national platform, and then was struck by overtraining injuries, ultimately a nasty back injury, which sort of put an end to my gymnastics career. But due to the love of the sport, I always stayed involved and originally started coaching at my club. And I've always just done that, even through university. And then when I started work, I always just had this communication with them. And it always just kept coming back to doing coaching for friends that I knew from the sport, or like I say, my original club. So always just had that. So I've been coaching probably since I was about 15 or so. So,
wow.
So many years in the sport now.
So cool. Now, I understand that you're the head coach at Kingston Gymnastics nowadays. So bringing this conversation to the present, could you tell us a little bit more about your business today?
Yeah, totally. So I call myself the head coach mainly because I didn't want to necessarily be the director or the owner. I felt that meant by being the head coach solely, and most importantly, the main thing that I do is coach the children. And I wanted obviously my coaching team around me to be able to make sure that they understood, to me, the coaching of the gymnastics was the most important element of the business. And obviously have a real passion for the coaching. So ultimately, we opened up the club in September last year. So we're a fairly infant business, really, with a view of offering affordable affordable gymnastics to the local community, with an aim of being sort of inclusive and being able to offer some real quality gymnastics coaching in the local area.
That's really interesting. Now, you mentioned something slightly earlier in our conversation, which I just wanted to bring up again, because it is fair to say that gymnastics is a great foundation for any sport, and it can really serve also as a springboard for getting children into other sports too. So with this in mind, Rebecca, what are some of the tips you would give to our listeners who perhaps are wanting their child to take up a sport or gymnastics with a view to progressing within that sport itself?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, gymnastics has so many benefits. If we talk about the different apparatus we use, just some children really struggle to even climb up onto a vault and have the confidence to stand at a height and then jump off. So there's a lot of sense of self-achievement just on minor sort of warm-up drills such as that. And then, of course, we've got balancing beams. So again, really excellent for developing that fundamental movement skill of balancing. And then we look at, again, even on the vault, your vault run up, it's developing power. And again, like really great extension of the hip, ankle and knee. So we're developing running technique, power off the springboard, strength on the bars, being able to hold yourself. So it really lends itself excellently to all of these things. For parents looking, or for listeners looking for tips and hints to getting their children involved, I mean, without sounding too crazy, anything can be a gymnastics forum. Walking along a small wall, providing it's safe. In the garden is a great place to do some bits and pieces, again, under the watchful eye of a parent, perhaps. But I think the main thing at the moment, and especially coming off the back of lockdown, is just getting children active. I think some children had a really rough time of it in lockdown, and weren't able to get out and about as much as they'd like. So my advice would just be get out in the outdoors, get your children running, skipping, hopping, moving in any way, which way they can. And then from there, you can start building your more sport-specific skills, whether that be gymnastics or into any arena, really.
I really like that, Rebecca, and I think those are really valuable tips. I appreciate you sharing those. You mentioned the lockdown period that we're living through at the moment. Could you tell us a little bit about how that impacted your business and the sort of ways you adapted your business to cater for this particular period of time?
Yeah, certainly. Well, unfortunately, our business was totally shut down due to lockdown. Being an indoor sport as well, we weren't able to start up as quickly as some of the other sports, such as football, for example, because we're in an indoor setting. So we've put in an extraordinary amount of measures at our club to ensure not only are we COVID safe and we've had the green light from our governing body, but almost going over and above that so that we can offer extra reassurance to parents. It's something I'm really passionate about, ensuring that obviously the children are coming into our care for those 45 minutes on a Saturday. And it's really important that parents feel that we're taking the COVID situation seriously and protecting their children whilst they're in our classes. Just to give you some examples, on arrival now, all children have their temperature tested and then they sanitise on arrival. We've completely changed the setup of our equipment. So now each child has their own working station that is socially distanced from the next. so that there is no point where they'll come within 2 meters of another child. And ultimately, we're working on a sort of circuit basis. So the children will work around various circuits of apparatus whilst being socially distanced from another, but still getting the opportunity to develop their gymnastic skills. And then on exit, again, they'll hand sanitize and then be dismissed back to their parents through our one-way system that we've implemented as well. So just a few of the, the slight things that we're doing. There's many, many more. But just to give an overview, we've really done our absolute best to ensure that we're giving children the opportunity to participate safely.
Yeah, that's really cool. And hats off to you, Rebecca. And, I've taken my hats off to a whole bunch of interviewees who I've spoken to on this show recently. I'm just super impressed how businesses have just really put their sleeves up and have found ways to adapt to this new normal that we're living through, which hopefully will go away at some point and we can go back to something that looks more like the old normal, which was pretty good actually in hindsight.
There's just so many things that we take for granted, especially in sort of like a gymnastic setting. So, for example, one group of children might use a bean bag on the beam to balance on their head to assist with their balance. Now, of course, we cannot share any bean bags between children. So whereas previously I had, a handful of bean bags for the club, I've now had to ensure that every child in the club has their own specific bean bag so that no equipment is shared. So that's just one example of one of the measures we've put in place to ensure the children are safe.
That's great. Rebecca, what are some of the key business lessons you've learned throughout your life?
So I think that the key things that I've learned are be passionate. I think that people love hearing from passionate people, and you can really share your passion. So I think that's really important. I think about having self-belief. Before I started this business, it was something I thought it might have been something I was interested in maybe pursuing, but I put up a lot of unnecessary obstacles in the way. So I would say, if you've got an idea, and don't just hide behind things, you can do it, come on. And then the other thing is, but be prepared to work hard. And then I think the only other thing that I've really stood by is by having my own standards, sort of always being professional and really having a pride for what I do, and making sure that if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. I'm not going to cut corners. I'm going to make sure that I've dotted the I's and crossed the T's and done the whole thing properly. And there's nothing worse than over-promising and under-delivering. So just say what you're going to do and then do it well would be my main advice.
That's really interesting. And I love the way that also mirrors with what's required for a good gymnast, right? Because you have to be brave to do some of these moves and to actually lean into some of the moves that are required. You've got to be disciplined to be able to actually get to the level where, you're doing it safely and everything else. And that just mirrors through to how you conduct your business. That's really cool.
Yeah, I often think that actually a lot of the sort of behind the scenes things that I was taught through my coaches. I had excellent coaches as a gymnast myself, things like the resilience, the respect, and that hard work builds results. A lot of these things were installed through me through my competitive training, and they've really served me very well moving into adult life.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. When you look back at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
So I think in relation to the club, I'm really proud of how we've emerged after COVID. If anything, we're back stronger. And like I said, we've put in a lot of different measures at the clubs, and we've bought a lot more equipment, which is obviously of a massive benefit to the participants. But I think being able to overcome something like COVID, and with all the paperwork and everything else that it's thrown up at us, and then being able to come out the other side and retain nearly all of our members and then continue to grow, I'm really chuffed with. And the other thing that I'm really pleased with is the sort of the atmosphere that I feel that I've created at the club. I think that the staff that I've got and the team that I've built around me, we're all on the same page. We've all got a brilliant work ethic, and there's a real great staff camaraderie coming into the club. And again, I think the children feed off that. We're all having a good time. Everyone's happy to be there. And I think that's something that's really to be proud of. The staff enjoy coming in as well. So I'm really pleased about that. Excellent.
Rebecca, what next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Yeah, definitely. So we're actually, this week I've just, I'm just due to sign the paperwork to open our second site at Kingston Gymnastics. So we're going to expand. We've got some waiting lists at the moment, so it felt that the time was right to perhaps move to a second site. So that will be it's a really exciting project, and hopefully watch this space on social media for me to be able to start some marketing on that over the next coming weeks. But we're hoping to start after half term, and again offering more really affordable and excellent gymnastics classes in the local Kingston community.
Exciting times ahead.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so.
As we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So Rebecca, what do you do to relax outside of the office?
So a lot of the things that I do to relax, and I'm a PE teacher as well, so being outdoors is obviously something I'm a fan of. So I've got young children. We spend a lot of time outdoors, sort of keeping fit. I run with my pushchair quite a lot, which I really enjoy. And just generally getting out and about in the countryside, perhaps exploring some of the National Trust sites or the RHS sites, the gardens. We spend quite a lot of time there at the moment, and it's lovely seeing all the changing autumn colours, and just generally being outside in the fresh air, I think, is so great for everyone. So that's certainly a way I relax.
And are there any books that you've recently read that you'd recommend to our listeners?
I mean, to be honest, with the situation at the minute and having two young children, my book library is looking more like Postman Pat and Peppa Pig at the moment. There's probably nothing that your listeners would be overly interested in, if I'm being quite frank.
It definitely looks like mine then. And are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you would recommend to our listeners?
I'm really into The Repair Shop at the moment. I just think that it's a wonderful TV show. It's on the BBC, and I'm sure it's on iPlayer as well. But I really enjoy, just probably similar to some of my business philosophies, I suppose, watching sort of craftspeople that are really excellent at their trade and really passionate about what they do and transforming something. It's just a joy to watch how these things come back to life and the backstory behind them. It's a really sort of guilty pleasure for me at the moment.
Yeah, I definitely second that. I haven't watched that show in particular, but I definitely know what you mean. So I'm a big fan of Chef's Table. And whilst I am a bit of a foodie, actually, it's about the story behind their craft and how they got to these particular dishes they're serving at their restaurants. That, for me, is the bit that's most interesting. It's the behind-the-scenes stories, right?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and occasionally a bit of a tearjerker as well, I think.
No doubt. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Absolutely. So we've got a website, which is www.kingstonGymnastics.co.uk. And we're also on all of the normal social media platforms. We've got an Instagram page, which is especially popular at the moment, mainly because we're not allowed any parents into the gym because of the COVID restrictions. So this is a really great platform so people can see what we're up to in the gym. So you can see the skills that we're working on and the setup that we've got, and obviously how much fun the children are having. So our Instagram page has been really popular, likewise with our Facebook account. And it's all, if you just put in Kingston Gym, it will come up.
Oh, very excellent. And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure I add these resources to the show notes. Rebecca, thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
No problem at all. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.